On a battlefield where bullets tore through the darkness, where artillery shook the earth and wounded soldiers cried out for help from the cliffs above Okinawa, one American soldier made a decision that seemed almost impossible. He would go back, again and again. While others were desperately trying to survive, he was moving toward the danger. While bullets were cutting through the air, he carried no rifle, while enemy fire surrounded him. His only weapon was a medic, S-bag, and an unbreakable determination to bring his fellow Americans home alive. And when the battle was finally over, the story of what happened on that terrible cliff would become one of the most extraordinary acts of courage in American military history. His name was Desmond Doss. He was an American soldier, a combat medic, and a man whose personal beliefs would make his path through World War II unlike that of almost anyone else in uniform. He believed deeply that human life was sacred. Because of his religious convictions, he refused to carry a weapon or take another human life. To many people around him, that decision seemed impossible to understand. This was war. He was entering an army preparing to fight one of the most brutal conflicts the world had ever known. Soldiers around him trained with rifles, machine guns, grenades, and bayonets. They were taught to attack the enemy and defend themselves. But Doss entered that world with a different purpose. He did not intend to kill. He intended to save. That decision came with a price. During his military training, Doss was ridiculed, questioned, and sometimes treated as though he did not belong among fighting men. Some soldiers believed that a man who refused to carry a rifle had no place on a battlefield. Others doubted that someone unwilling to use a weapon could ever be trusted when the fighting became intense. But Doss refused to abandon his convictions. He believed that courage was not measured by how many people a man could defeat. He believed courage could also mean walking directly into danger to save someone else. Then came Okinawa. By the spring of 1945, American forces were fighting their way across the Pacific toward the Japanese home islands. Okinawa would become one of the bloodiest campaigns of the entire Pacific War. The island was heavily defended, and the Japanese forces had transformed the landscape into a network of fortified positions, caves, tunnels, and hidden firing points. American troops faced artillery, machine guns, mortars, snipers, and attacks that could come from almost anywhere. Every hill and every ridge could become a battlefield. And above one of the most dangerous areas stood a massive escarpment later known to American soldiers as the Maida Escarpment, a cliff rising above the battlefield like a wall. For the men ordered to climb it, there was no easy way forward. American soldiers moved toward the cliff under heavy enemy fire. The higher they climbed, the more exposed they became. Then the battlefield erupted. Explosions shook the ground. Machine guns opened fire. Men who had been standing beside their friends moments earlier suddenly fell wounded on the battlefield. The assault became chaos, and eventually the American forces were forced to withdraw from the exposed position. But Desmond Doss remained. Somewhere on that terrifying cliff, wounded American soldiers were still lying alone, and Doss could not leave them behind. He had every reason to retreat. He had no rifle. He had no way to fight back. The enemy was still nearby, and the darkness offered little protection. But instead of following the other soldiers to safety, Doss turned around and walked back into the battlefield. He found one wounded soldier. He treated him. Then he carried him to the edge of the cliff and lowered him down. Then he went back. Another wounded soldier. Another rescue. Then another. Each time he returned to the battlefield, he knew he might not come back. Every trip across the exposed ground brought him closer to enemy fire. Every moment he spent treating a wounded man made him a larger target. But he continued. One man, then another, then another. The darkness grew deeper, but Doss refused to stop. American soldiers below watched in disbelief as a figure moved through the darkness above them. They could not understand how he was still there. The battle had become too dangerous. The enemy was still firing, yet somehow this unarmed medic kept returning to the wounded. Das later described the moment simply. He did not believe he was doing something extraordinary. He believed he was doing what he had been sent there to do, save as many lives as possible. For hours, he continued moving through the battlefield. The man who had once been mocked because he refused to carry a weapon was now risking his life more times than anyone around him could count. He crawled through the darkness. He treated wounds. He carried men who could no longer walk. He dragged them towards safety and lowered them down the cliff one at a time. And every time he reached safety, he looked back toward the battlefield. There were still men up there, so he went back, again and again and again. By the time the rescue was over, Das had helped save approximately 75 wounded American soldiers, 75 men who might otherwise have been left behind, 75 families who would eventually receive a letter telling them their son, brother, husband, or father was coming home. 75 lives connected forever to the decision of one man who refused to abandon them. But the story of Desmond Doss does not end on that cliff, because his greatest act of courage was not simply surviving the battle. It was continuing to serve after everything he had already endured. Doss would eventually receive America's highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor. The award recognized his extraordinary courage under fire and his actions in saving wounded soldiers while refusing to carry a weapon. The man who had once been doubted by those around him had become a symbol of a very different kind of bravery. His story reminds us that courage can take many forms. Sometimes courage is charging forward with a weapon. Sometimes courage is standing your ground when everyone else is running. And sometimes courage is walking into the most dangerous place on earth because someone else is hurt and needs you. Desmond Doss never became famous because he killed an enemy soldier. He became famous because he saved American lives. His story is one of the many stories that remind us why the history of World War II is not simply a history of battles, generals, and military victories. It is a history of ordinary people placed in extraordinary circumstances, forced to make decisions that would define the rest of their lives. Millions of Americans served during the war. Many never returned home. Others came back carrying wounds that could not be seen. They left behind families, careers, childhoods, and dreams because their country called upon them during one of the darkest moments in human history. And among those millions was one man who went to war without a rifle. He went armed with something else, a belief that every life mattered, a determination to never leave a wounded man behind, and the courage to keep going when every instinct told him to run. On that cliff in Okinawa, surrounded by darkness and enemy fire, Desmond Doss proved something that would echo through American history for generations. You do not have to take a life to be a hero. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who risk everything to save one. And sometimes when the world is watching history unfold, the most powerful weapon on the battlefield is not a rifle.